Jared has done this.
It's just awful, though. It's the heaviest thing, and it feels weird. And it does minimize the recoil on the Glock, but it just feels different, and I don't like it, and it feels super sluggish.
I forget when I messed around with this. I think it was when I had my MP, my 1.0 Pro, and I was doing a bunch of stuff to it. And I remember waiting out taking lead shot and then filling up a TLR1 with it and then putting it on the gun and then shooting with it. And the funny thing is with that is that it would make the non-perception of lift, or not lifting as much as you thought it would, kind of made the gun feel like it was dipping in recoil, which I didn't like.
Well, and I think it just makes the whole gun unbalanced, and that's the biggest thing for me. Is it's obviously super front heavy. I mean, if you try to find the balance point, it's insane. And so I don't think I'm gonna keep it. I think I'm just gonna go back to a normal light.
Right.
But
I remember my brother-in-law, Brad and Chris. They both are really big off-roaders, and we always had these conversations about how people would go and they would put big tires and a bit of a lift on their Jeeps or whatever. And there's a point where it's like, okay, yeah, cool, that works. But then the further you go down the road, you start to introduce problems because you changed one thing. And by changing one thing, you then have to change another thing. And the process goes on and on if you want to make it work. And so that example actually applies to the guns as well. People are like, cool, let's put tons of weight up into the light, for example. Well, that's fine, but you've now off balanced that gun. So now it's got this nose heavy. So okay, well, let's put some weight in the back of it to drive it back. And eventually you're basically putting tons of weight into all these different places just to make the gun do what the gun originally was doing, just lighter. And it's kind of the point of diminishing returns.
Well, isn't that what Kenny Platt ran into when he had that fly flight on? Then he looked at his match view and realized the gun was dipping slightly, and he had to correct that, right?
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah,
and that doesn't surprise me at all.
Well, it's kind of funny because when we sit there and we talk about very small guns, if we're talking to new people who are getting into shooting, we talk about little small guns, right? And we go look, it shoots the same bullet as this gun, but it's much smaller. So you're going to have the perception of that recoil impulse is going to be a lot heavier. Now we're running into the part is this shoots the same bullet, but it's 2.5 times as heavy. And so the perception of what's going to happen is going to be completely different. So the felt recoil is going to go almost to nothing. And in fact, the reciprocation of the slide going forward could introduce a dip into the muzzle.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that's just we've touched the other end of what's going on. I'll be right back.
No, that's no problem. And that's the funny thing is, I mean, you do that. I mean, I saw that with the Shadow 2 because you're like, okay, cool. The Shadow 2 by itself is very nose heavy. I mean, everybody talks about that. And so you're like, cool, let's put some weight in the back. Well, as soon as you do that, you start balancing it to the rear. You're like, okay, well, now we need to put weight back in the front, which is what we were trying to get rid of in the first place. And so you put a tungsten guy rod into the front.
And then you end up with a
54-ounce gun because you're trying to resolve a problem that maybe the argument is didn't need to. Now, I happen to like my gun right where it is, and I can't think of anything I'd do to it. That's today. Let me talk to John for about an hour. I'm sure I'll change something. But yeah, it's the craziest thing how we play that game.
You know what I think is crazy? Comps are illegal in most divisions. Adding 35 ounces, perfectly fine. That seems a little nuts to me.
It's different. It's different.
It's different. We could add a comp and it would be 2 ounces, and then it would lower it down, and it's actually a little bit more realistic than taping another gun on top of yours. Welcome to the PARAcast. I'm your host, Tomas the Boss Hernandez, living life, not pain-free. Joining me tonight, that Leah Thomas gets him a little hot under the collar. It's Robert Wyatt.
Yeah, but not for the reasons you think.
He's waiting for that OnlyFans.
All I'm saying is there's a pickup truck. And oh, never mind. I'd get arrested for that.
YeeMin
shakes his head in disgust.
Steve,
Disavow now.
Steve and Candy couldn't make it tonight, so filling in. He just likes the weight of it against his face. It's Jared Stepp.
That's reasonable. It's comforting. It's comforting. Okay.
It's like a weighted blanket. You know.
Yeah.
Just
it makes me feel close and cozy.
Just skin toned. And he'll be at a match near you shaking hands and siphoning gas in the parking lot. It's YeeMin Lin.
Well, gas prices are not great, so it's highly likely.
Is it like every time someone comes around the corner, he's doing like a gasoline spit take? Well, sorry, I don't know what I'm doing here.
Well, it used to be that like people would hand him $20 to get some really good range music. Now they're handing him $20, and he's like, I could actually use some gas money, so if you could just bring me over a couple gallons, I could make this work.
His dad is like, your teeth look good, but man, they look great now. What are you doing? I got no hint of gingivitis or halitosis, but you know what? I feel like some gas station nachos for some reason talking to you. Anyways, we went out. We shot a match yesterday. Well, I shot 5/6 of a match, and Robert shot 6/6 of the match, and Stepp shot all the match and limited because when's your cop match? When's your everyone must be muzzled twice match?
It's in April, and it's going to be a great time. Don't worry, they're just muzzling you with HSTs or gold dots. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But even if they let a round off, will it actually hit anything?
Exactly. That's the thing. Last time.
Well, no, that's the problem. Is like if they're aiming at you, you're safe.
Well, one of the last matches, we had this one old guy torch a round off into the ground, and the joke was we had to tell him to at least yell "Stop resisting" after he shot the ground.
We laugh because it's true.
It's that kind of thing when you see the shooter start to pull the gun out of the holster and you say, load and make ready. And so it's like after the shot goes fire, someone yells gun as fast as they can. I thought it was there. Anyway,
we had that yesterday, Tommy. It was on that hotel stage right after you left.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there and the guy turns around and says, "Okay, so I do this when you say make ready." I'm like, "Uh-huh." He starts pulling the gun out, like right as it's about to clear leather, and I'm like, "Make ready."
Yeah.
And safe.
It's funny what we try to get away. Speaking of the match yesterday, I have my notes of stuff that I was sitting there trying to work on. Besides, I feel so bad because I got up and I was like, I did some exercises. I got to the range, did some more squats, did some more push-ups, tried to get nice and warmed, try to go out there and do it, and then I just have my freaking arthritic back spike me. And so then everything seized up, and I was just like, oh. But it's only like staying low and leaning slightly forward. So good thing it doesn't bug me. Oh wait, it bugs me the entire time.
Doesn't affect you in any of.
Yeah, that's. And so it's just a pain. I was so freaking depressed walking home yesterday, but we were sitting there going, and it was just funny. It's like I have 3 or 4 carry optics matches like under my belt, like essentially 24 stages of carry optics, and 2 on this gun, and it is humbling to work on 2 things at once, but to work on 2 things that are like completely kind of weird. So just the shooting is like my first shots were pretty good. My second shots were Charlies on mostly everything, and I think my gun. I was watching my video. I think my gun is shooting high and right. So I might have to go out there and re-zero it. But I was sitting there going through it, trying to push the movement. It's like the movement was good. I was getting better on the movement there, but the
Too
points
good, apparently.
the points on the shoot. Yeah, well, you know what got me was like I'm gonna start picking up brass now, and I got like to the 3rd one. I was like, ow, and then I was like having a hard time getting back up. But yeah, I got a list of stuff. The one thing is like I've been practicing like transitioning stably in the dot. What I did not do in practice, which I found out yesterday, is like aiming at a 6-foot target, transitioning wide to the left on a 2-foot target. And then so that dot would, like, you always hear like the dot's high. And so, but when I was doing that, the dot was like really low, and so I had like this weird transition, and then found the dot, and then had to re-engage. But just some stuff to work on. But
you got to practice more shooting dogs.
Yeah, tracking dogs. Follow the dog through the target.
Plus side, I don't get on social media often, but apparently the ATF is hiring. So
no,
you know,
they're always hiring.
I mean, excellent government benefits.
Well, I don't think they have to hire as much because that in the omnibus bill, they are now allowed to deputize local law enforcement to go after and look for your rare breed triggers and your 80% lowers. And
really,
yes, yep. That made it through in the omnibus bill, and also what made it through.
Jared, if you show up at my house, you and I are going to have a conversation that involves Jesus.
Dude, I want to get cross-sworn as an ATF agent.
They also are going to try to push their new rule on 80% lowers. That those have to be serialized, I think, by April, and then the brace stuff might be in June, is what the scuttlebutt is. So.
Well, you know the funny thing about that stuff applies to anybody who's actually inclined to actually follow it.
Yes.
Yep,
yeah.
Those were the crickets that you heard.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that's kind of weird, if they sit there and somehow get the transactional records of some of these companies, then they just deputize local law enforcement to go look for them. That's where it gets a little weird.
The funny thing about that the omnibus bill or whatever is like, everybody was so jazzed up to send money over to Ukraine that they're like, oh, yeah, we're just going to go and pass all this kind of garbage. But there's an interesting thing. They're going to go and send money to Ukraine to fight off, like to give them guns, but they're going to deny the people of their own country guns.
Well, they're not going to.
I mean, that just seems kind of odd, especially like on this day of all days when, you know, this is the anniversary of the United States lying to get us into Iraq and saying the same things that now Russia is doing. But nobody talked about that. We're not going to discuss that. That has nothing to do with anything. I promise you.
Well,
you're thinking too much, Robert.
I probably should stop that.
Lay off the weed, Robert.
You damn hippies.
Yeah, your peacenik stuff. Anyways, Robert, let's talk about your experience of the match yesterday.
It was fun. It was I showed up to the match. It was really funny because like earlier in the week I signed up and everything and I got on a squad and then I get a message from Eric and he's like, dude, why don't we all hop on squad 5? Because that's gonna be like the best squad. We'll get Dirk to come over and Brett and then like
is that how that happened?
Yeah. And then Jared was like and Jared was on that squad. I'm like, dude, this is gonna be a kicking squad. I mean, like this is area level awesomeness of squads. So we had this like just awesome effing squad for Saturday, and I rolled up to the match. I told Andrea like I woke up early to come to the match and everything like that, and I kind of like kiss Andrea goodbye, and I'm like, oh dude, it's gonna be a great day. I got a really great squad to be on. She's like, oh cool, go have fun. I show up to the match, get out of the car, start walking towards registration. I see Tommy walking up, and I'm like, hey Tommy. He's like, hey. You need to switch squads with me. Why? Because I'm lonely.
I was like, you could come sweet. Well, here's the other deal: is like you had squad 5 that had like 8 ROs, and then you had 2 ROs for the other 4 squads, and so they were trying to figure out who's going over it. So I was like, well, you know, I offered somebody else, and then they moved that person, and that person didn't show up, and they're like, well, we'll get Robert to move over, and so
I responded to him like. I told him I would do what we always do. Just ignore them and we'll put you on our squad because it's a good squad. But then Tommy's like, no, I'm a rule follower. And I'm like, but I'm not. But apparently...
Well, apparently you are.
Squad too. It actually... Okay, so we moved over and it actually worked out really good because... all of the guys that happened to be on that squad had also attended the new shooter match 2 weeks before. And so in just kind of one of those just twists of fate, it worked out really well because they kind of had a friendly face of somebody that they knew, which is always important if you're new to a club, whatever. And so that actually turned out to be really positive. And they all had a great time and it was a fun squad. We actually got done earlier than a couple of the squads. I think some of the other guys got backed up on Brett Thomas's stage.
And so bad.
Yeah. I knew that stage with all the steel was just going to be.
That
was a terrible idea, Brett.
We have a
terrible idea.
We have a question later about night matches. What you should do in night matches? Shorter, non-complex stages. Do not put 30 pieces of steel in a day stage. Do not put 30 pieces of steel in a night stage and a night match. So
yeah, it was, but no, it was a fun day. I admittedly, so Tommy and I, like the stages that we got to shoot together, we'd go through, we'd pull up to them, we'd look at them, and just talk about good ideas and different ways to shoot them and things like that. And it ended up being a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. But yeah, I took I think I took 3rd in carry optics and 5th overall in the match. But Jared pointed out, yeah, but you were shooting an iron-sighted gun, and I barely beat you. That actually is saying something for how good you did, because that was not an iron. That there was 2 things about that match that were true. It was not a major friendly match, and it was not an iron-sighted match.
30 pieces of steel on a stage and 6 shots on paper is not an iron friendly or major friendly match.
Just that, but I mean, look at all the scoring zones for all the other targets. They were very heavily partialed or blacked up.
Poor Clay. We shot that 30 freaking piece of steel stage, and after he shot it, I looked at him like, there goes like $20. He's just quiet for a second. He's like, that's probably actually definitely more than that. And I'm just like, man.
Yeah, and I mean, okay, so to be fair to Brett, if just so we don't completely throw him under the bus,
it was fun. I did love it.
It was a fun stage. Barry's Steel Open is coming up in a couple weeks or something like that, and he wanted to set up a stage so that people who were going to go shoot that match could have a little bit of a practice stage, just to get it under their belt to know what they'd be up against. And I thought that was pretty nice of him to do. It obviously, you don't want to do that on every single match. There's tons of problems that come with that. But I thought it was really a good idea of him to at least throw that out there so people could kind of get a heads up of when we're going to go shoot.
It was a fun stage, but when like the actual like the good shooters of the group were shooting it in 30 seconds, that's gonna slow everything down. Just that, not even counting the reset. The fact that a good shooter takes 30 seconds on a stage, and the poor new guys are getting to the triple digits, it's gonna slow.
Well, Robert went there and said, like, look, guys, don't go to war with this steel, because you will spend all your ammo on the stage. Like, it's not worth it. So we had guys, newer shooters, who left 5 or 6 up and moved on with their life. The funny thing is like they were also new to resetting a lot, and so I had some of them where I was sending rounds, and it's just like wing, because you're already shooting out of a bit of an angle, and so.
I had to tell a bunch of those guys, make sure when you set the steel, set it towards basically the position that the shooter would normally be doing it, because otherwise they're just going to go and like plop the steel on there. It's going to rattle a little bit, and then they'll twist it or some dumb thing like that. We also have that. I mean, it wasn't on this stage, but we have that steel that was built a number of years ago that's got those hinge plates on them, and they're just a rough piece of steel, because that hinge plate basically means you're having to aim for the tippy top of that steel to get it to reliably go down, and it never reliably goes down. It just doesn't.
Yeah. And this one, Steph, you're shooting what? Your 2011? Were you shooting a Glock?
I was shooting 2011. I was shooting just a 9 limited gun, which hopefully I'll get a shoot and carry optics soon.
Yeah. That's funny. So at the indoor match,
look at this carry optics gun. It's so nice.
Well, Riser brought out his 3-gun. So it's a Slide Ride 2011 to the indoor match on Thursday, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to shoot open because that's where it is. And I'm like, I don't actually really care. I don't think it matters. I mean, you've shot my Shadow 2. There's no functional difference. I mean, my Shadow 2 and a 2011, it's the same basic gun. And so we shot against each other in it, and yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He beat me on time, and I beat him on points. And
suck it, Adam.
but yeah, I mean, It's like I said last week. I don't so much care that they want to add it to the division as I just don't like the process. What do I know? I don't know. I guess I've just gotten to the point where these guns are just so similar. It's hard to know.
Speaking from someone who has competed in USPSA for like 5 years in limited minor, it would be awesome to actually have a division where I could shoot my 2011, which was my favorite gun, where I could actually shoot it in a competitive division. But at the same time, I totally understand it. And the reason why I shoot this is because it's fun. It's not because I know I'm not trying to win. I'm just trying to have a good time. If I want to win, I'll take out the open gun and go full ham and get major scoring.
Right.
But this just the 9 and 2011s is just absolute blast.
Oh, I've shot them. It's a hoot to shoot.
Well, before we start talking about divisional changes, let's YeeMin, let's talk about your day today. Look at you, sun-baked in the clubhouse, and then we'll hit the sponsors. Then we'll go through questions for YeeMin, who is running for USPSA president.
So today was our bi-weekly match at Richmond Rod and Gun Club. So we had a gap in coverage for match director. So like a fool that I am, I said, hey, I will run this match. I was fortunate enough to have another experienced guy with me, so it really helps when you have. We had 134 competitors over 2 days.
Jeez.
Yeah, I had 134 competitors over 2 days, so it helped to have someone else helping with the match to be able to split and divide and conquer and so forth.
So this is a 2-day match, but it's one match, but it's one match, but you can have two. You have 2 flights.
Yeah. So originally, when we only had five stages, when we ran on Sundays, you would get 25 plus man squads, and that is not anybody's idea of a good time. So about
especially since like a certain demographic of those Californians don't reset.
They're generally pretty good about it. It's not
there
really
are that many GMs out there?
No, I wish.
Yes,
I wish.
GMs.
Wow.
So about 3 or 4 years ago, we started actually shooting on Saturdays. So we have 4 or 5 squads of 10 that shoot on Saturdays, and that's more akin to the matches that most people will experience. The caveat is that if you're going to shoot on Saturday, you are absolutely going to reset because there's not enough people for you to just clean your bags and sit around. And we generally try to limit Saturday to the more experienced competitors. So generally no noobs as much as possible. I mean, if we have noobs that show up, we'll still let them shoot, but we try to keep it to a minimum just to ensure that we have enough RO coverage for every squad. And then Sunday is our walk-in. Anybody can come in and shoot. So it makes for a challenge. I mean, we have our regularly scheduled practices every Saturday. So we have practice from 9:30 to 1:30, and then we start our Saturday match at 3, which gives us about an hour and a half to build.
Wow.
Ouch.
It's such an odd thing. I mean, because in California, your guys' clubs will run more shooters in a weekend than some clubs will do in like 2 or 3 months. I mean, you guys just have so many people by comparison. Like most clubs are like, yeah, we had 50 people show up and it was a banner year. And you guys are like, yeah, that's a really slow day.
The only time I've ever seen less than 70 is when it rained.
Yeah. And even then they're still coming out.
Yeah, no, they're still coming out. I mean, on average, where our average is about 130, we've gotten as high as 160. SoCal's roughly the same. They're averaging between 100 and 120 in a match. There's just that many people that are willing to shoot, because if you want to do anything other than stand at a public line and fire 1 round every 3 seconds, you have to do.
Yeah.
Even IDPA, IDPA, USPSA, any type of action shooting.
How many stages do you guys normally do?
We used to do 5, and then we got some new bays built during COVID. So we actually have 6 stages now. So it's 5 stages in a classifier.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
That's a lot of fun.
Because you got to imagine, I mean, if most of us out here in Utah, if we want to go shoot and we don't even want to go to an actual facility, we just head on out and you have some shooting spot on some BLM land and you just set up some targets and gat it however you want to and
go to West Valley and you're good.
Go.
Whereas in California, they go to Southside.
Right.
I mean, the closest BLM land to up here in the San Francisco Bay Area is about an hour and a half away.
Yeah.
But Oakland's only 15.
This is true. This is true. You know,
it's always just so funny to me about California has this perception, which it's a warranted perception that it's basically behind enemy lines. It's a foreign country. They hate guns, this, that, and the other. But California, as a state, puts out more high-level shooters than just about everybody else. I mean, like in some cases combined. It's crazy how many people show up in California. Wow. There's so many gun owners.
It's just a numbers game.
Yep.
Yeah, it is a numbers game. I mean, but there's also a significant amount of the firearms industry that used to be in California.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you look at the original Swenson thumb safeties, Swenson, who designed that for 1911s, he was out of California. There was King's Guns Works that after it closed down in Southern California. If you look at Apex Tactical was out of San Luis Obispo. So there's always been that market there for firearms innovation, and then they sort of realized California doesn't like business, and in particular it doesn't like gun businesses, and they get to a certain size and they leave.
Yeah, it's the craziest thing in the world.
Well, you know who won't leave you? Dominate Defense, because it's on your waist right now. So head on over to Dominate Defense, use promo code PARA10, save 10% off your Mach 1 speed belt, which is still the fanciest, finest belt out there in the industry. So spend your money, get something like that, buy once, cry once, you'll be happy. Also, head on over to gallantbolts.com, use promo code PUPRO10, save 10% off your first order, and check out Precision Holsters, who are in California, and get one of their fast holsters. Use promo code PARA10 and save 10% off, quite possibly the best competition bucket-style holster out there available. So do all that jazz. Okay, so we have questions. We got a lot of questions in the Telegram chat there. And so we have YeeMin, who's running for USPSA president. Some stuff will be about that. Get his ideas on it. So we'll try to have him elaborate on what his thoughts are before we hop in on some of those. But we'll go to whoever gets asked the questions after that. Robert?
Well, right off the bat, Tommy, what's your take on the new IDPAs?
The new IDPA rules. So I sat there and I read it. And my overall impression would be like an 85% good change. So there's
in some ways, IDPA just dunked on USPSA.
Yeah, well, like I love my favorite thing is like bitches. Just because the target's on backwards doesn't mean you get to reshoot. Sorry, you're gonna have to take the score. That was like my favorite thing. Is like, so I just have a couple notes. So IWB, fine, great, they did it. It's all the divisions. PCC 10.
Unfortunately, they're not going to let Brian Levy back in, nor does he want to be back in after.
Wait, what is PCC 10?
10 round PCC.
Oh, I was hoping 10 millimeter. I was like, oh, that'd be awesome. They're big dick in it over there.
That's major. 200.
I tell you, if I can shoot my 45,
I like it.
I'll take those major points.
Back in the day when we used to have those Utah State IDPA matches, Steve would come up with some of these like fun awards, and one of them was for like the manliest award was like whoever had the highest power factor at Chrono.
I remember that.
And one guy had a CDP power factor of 203.
Jeez.
What was he shooting?
Just a 45 1911. And so
well, he was
you got it.
Yeah, he went to Cabela's on the way there, and all they had on the shelf was this.
I don't think
Buffalo Boar.
Buffalo Boar. Yeah, Buffalo Boar. Like it's hard. It is like you would be hard pressed to find 45 230 grain that could do it. So it's like 230 grain moving at what? 880 feet per second. Like that 1911 had to be like crying every time like the slide went back. But yeah, so they used to have PCC as a 10-round division, and then it became a high-capacity division. It should just be a 10-round division. It's like if we're going to have 18 rounds per stage, there's no reason to have high-capacity stuff on it. I don't think it's... non-shooting PEs. So this is funny. So like carrying a baby or carrying a stroller or like pulling a dummy or saying something like, I hate these effing rules.
Mother scratcher.
or like not saying
Joyce
the
Wilson is really a man.
Yeah, well, you can't. Well, remember they would be like say like, and then you must say,
Yeah.
drop the bag, scumbag. So you can't get a
Yo,
non-shooting
homie,
penalty.
is that my briefcase?
Is that my briefcase? Right? So you don't get those anymore. No movement penalties anymore, because they came to the conclusion, just like in USPSA, the goal is to shoot the lowest time. So they're not going to penalize you for not moving during a course of fire when they told you to shoot on the move. So that's pretty interesting. SSP to 15. This is kind of one of the most blatant Wilson combat plugs I've ever heard in my life, because there is so stock service pistol, 15 rounds. CCP goes from 8 to 10. Everything else stays the same. Well, why does enhanced service pistol and carry optics go to 15 rounds? Because then you can't have single action guns, single stack, single action guns. They can't hold that many. So effectively, it would cut them all out of being competitive. And so, since there's none of those,
are you saying that Wilson Combat created a game and then tailored the rule set to specifically help their market share?
Well,
Tommy, you are insinuating a lot there, and I think
honestly,
you are
it's
out
genius.
over your skis.
It's pretty it is pretty genius, because their carry optics. They did their carry optics kind of right, as they took their enhanced service pistol rules and put it in there, and then put a weight class. So like you can shoot a lighter aluminum or polymer framed 2011 style pistol in that division and have a magwell and then be perfectly fine. And if stock service pistol wants to be 15 rounds, like I don't like that, because I like the idea of having a possible third reload in a stage somewhere or anything like that. So as far as that rule, it's kind of that's one I really don't like. Reloads now are if the magazines.
I don't like reloads either anymore.
Yeah, the magazines, because before it was like if the gun had a round in it and you dropped an empty magazine, that was a penalty. Now if the magazine's empty, the magazine's empty. So you can count your rounds kind of now in IDPA and make it a little bit faster or whatnot. Let's see. Fault lines. This was genius. This is what they should have done in the beginning. Fault lines can only be from 3 feet to 8 feet. They do not extend till infinity to the end of the stage. And it's just like good, because one of the things that was IDPA was nice was that you had to obey the scenario. And when they kind of just opened the fault lines, you could just kind of be like, well, as long as I'm on this side of the fault line engaging these targets, I can be anywhere I damn well please. And so this one kind of IDPA is like a story that's written by the stage designer, and so he gets to put people where he wants to in that part of the story, and so that's kind of nice that they've actually done that. And then the match bumps, which I thought was interesting. So you used to have to beat like 10 people, and so now if you win a division, you only have to beat 5 people of equal or higher classification before you get a match bump.
Wait, that's it? 5 people?
Yes. Well, you also have to remember. I mean, I think they screwed up their classification system with that 5x5, and so I don't know. Never mind.
Well, the second place still has to beat 10, like they used to.
Oh, is it 5, 10, 15 or something?
Something like that. I think it might just be 5 and 10. If you're in third place, like too bad.
You're screwed.
Yeah. So, but
and that's fair, because that means third place marksman is going to get bumped out. In reality, I mean, as everybody knows, when you're down on those lower levels, the marksman, the person who wins marksman should have been a sharpshooter, and in some cases should have been an expert. That's just where they came in.
Yeah, well, and I think that's good, because if you beat 10 people, let's say you're second place, 10 people that are in your classification, you get a bump. That's fine with me. And the other people who are already grant bagging, guess what? In IDPA, they're already masters. They can't go nowhere else. So.
Yeah. You know where that's actually good in IDPA is some of the smaller divisions. So like Revolver was always one of those weird things where there just wasn't that many competitors. There's a lot more than in USPSA for sure, but you pretty much were guaranteed that you would never bump at a major that was kind of a sectional level major, because there just wasn't enough people divided among all of the match inside of the respective classes. So you're always just kind of screwed, and you just like, well, I can do it through the classifier, but that's it. Yeah. And so you would have people that they would just bag the classifier, and they'd come in and they'd win high overall as a sharpshooter, and you're like, okay, well, something's clearly wrong here.
Yeah. And so it's like, as far as like what they've done with the rule, like that is a perfect, almost perfect kind of overhaul of some of the rules and the problems that they had in it. So it's like you didn't get half a second points down back, but what you got was like a very clear, simplified rule book. So like their rule book keeps getting smaller.
But
I will
it keeps getting more restrictive.
It does make me excited for the IDPA match at Slipsa later this year for the state IDPA match.
Yep.
I think that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so.
Is that thing still going? I didn't hear is it actually still on schedule?
I don't know.
I'm not sure,
Okay.
but the one thing that's kind of, so this will take place, I think June 1st or end of June or beginning of June is when the new rule book takes place, and so that's pretty neat. But you're going to see appendix carry.
I think there's clubs that are already starting to run it.
Well, the other part too, what that was great is like, hey, you don't need magazine pouches anymore. Forget that.
Oh, Tommy, the other thing, clubs cannot run tribal rules. That was one of the big things. It says in the announcement said, if you are a member of IDPA, if your club is, you have to follow IDPA rules. You can't go and do this basically, welcome to Bob's IDPA match. You actually have to follow the IDPA rule set. Now, buried inside of that is, if the club has like some weird range restriction, like, you can't point the gun in the air or some crazy thing like that, that's that. But it's actually, that's a really good thing for them to clarify that, because that's always been an issue with IDPA. Even though they have a rule set, USPSA has one really strong advantage in that you can go anywhere and the rule set is pretty darn solid. Whereas the IDPA matches were always a little bit squishy.
Well, that's just because there's defensive in the name. And when you get people are like, when people think that they're actually playing in like defensive practice, then they are playing a game. There is a little bit more of a tendency for them to kind of like, well, this is what I would do, and this is how I carry, and this is the gun that I have. And because I showed up here and put 27 targets up, you're going to have to let me do the things that I want to do.
Right.
And so, and that's the one deal. The one thing that both sports have a problem with is telling people they can no longer do things that they like doing. It's like, we're never going to take away divisions because we're never going to take away people's guns that they bought, and IDPA is never going to send anybody home. For most people, aren't going to send anybody home. But the nice thing is now is like they can drop the ban hammer kind of on them. It's because an equipment problem is no longer a DQ if you fail equipment. It's a DNF. It's like, please play. You're not playing for score. Would you like a score? We would like you to run a different holster or gun, or take the magwell off, or be in the right division. Right. Put the right amount of rounds in your gun. Like it's an awesome change. So good for them.
Yeah, Dave Blanton put out a podcast talking about this as well on his Humble Marksman podcast, and he went through the same things. There's a lot real good. I mean, credit where it's due and when it's due. IDPA made some really solid changes. Yeah, and I don't know why. Actually, I do know why they didn't let ISP go to or ESP go to 15 rounds. My understanding that was very much a Wilson Combat thing. They would lose their market share. By doing that.
And all the other guns that kind of fit into that category.
Yeah, CCP went up to 10 rounds, which makes perfect sense. I mean, why was it at 8? That was the dumbest thing. That never made any sense.
Well,
compact carry pistol, they all, even when they made it, they were all holding 10 rounds.
It just sucks for the guys running the old single stack shields and those type of guns. They kind of got kicked out. But yeah,
you know what? I get that, but at a certain point, maybe we just have to say, I appreciate that your gun was relevant in 1911. But the times they are a changing.
As we talk about,
we shouldn't hang on to them anymore.
Literally, as we talk about taking 2011s and putting them in carry optics.
I get it. I get it.
What's the difference?
It is hard.
We made this part fatter, and then we moved on. Anyways, let's hit some of these questions for YeeMin.
Fair enough. So YeeMin, if you could only have one big accomplishment as president, what would it be?
So one of the things we talked about before, Robert, is the whole new competitor guide, the new club guide. I mean, I think that's something that's fairly readily achievable. I think even within the remainder of the current election term. So just to have something where somebody interested in USPSA could actually Google it and find it on YouTube and be able to say, okay, if I'm going to go to my match, how do I go about doing this? We can always point people at a USPSA website, but even for us having done this for a number of years, it's not the easiest to navigate, right? I mean, if you wanted to actually say, hey, how do I join USPSA? You would want that probably be within like the top third of the webpage, like a big click that says, hey, join USPSA or find a club near you, or what do you need involved? Certainly you do that with your new shooter match at the Armory. That's something we do here at Richmond, where we teach, a new competitor class where we basically give them all the information up front that says, hey, this is what you're going to see. This is what you should bring with you. This is what the volunteer culture is like. And then, so when they come up to their first match, it's not, hey, I'm new. Like, what do I do?
Right.
So to have something like that in manageable chunks, it doesn't necessarily have to be, a 10-minute YouTube video. I mean, it could be 30 seconds of, what do I bring to the range? What ammo do I have? Just very high level stuff. And I think being able to accomplish that up front to at least increase the exposure of what USPSA is and, how relatively low the bar is.
Mm-hmm.
I think you do a really good job at this at the Armory, where, people just show up and again, they don't necessarily, there's certainly this impression that in order for you to start competitive shooting, sometimes that you already have to be very skilled at handling a pistol. And that's certainly not the case. I mean, as long as they're following the basic safety rules, everything else,
most of them,
can guide them.
Most of them.
Okay. Most of them. I mean, what's the number one rule, Robert?
Don't point the gun at Robert.
Exactly.
Well, it's almost very much like that. Like there's like, I honestly think that there should be another level in USPSA, which is like square one or like level 0.
Well, that's the new shooter match.
Well,
I think that's the beauty of that match. I mean, but the thing is, the word, I've always kind of like struggled with this because the word match is not really the appropriate term in this case. It's the new shooter class, but I don't
orientation.
Like orientation.
Well,
what I do at that new shooter match, I've literally only DQ'd 2 people from the new shooter match, but that doesn't mean that people haven't pointed the gun up range or done things that they shouldn't do with the gun that we would normally toss anybody for. But that is a class environment, and we are trying to teach them. We're trying to give them enough information that they can go to the real matches, the big proper matches, and do so with enough confidence that they're not basically trying to figure out how to walk and shoot a stage at the same time.
Yeah, I almost think that USPSA almost needs a certain amount of leniency as far as the rules for like a level like 0 match. So it's not even a match.
Never ever allow that.
Liability,
and they can't.
Yeah,
they can't. So the people who run new shooter matches, that's what I'm saying. It's not really a match. It's kind of a class thing where it's like, we are going to teach you how to do these things in a safe and as nurturing environment as possible. I think it's a great idea, YeeMin. I'm very much in favor of that because. Go ahead.
I mean, that's certainly something that we did in our class. So we do this, I think, two weekends a month. So I teach those classes every once in a while, and that is, because we don't define it as a match, then USPSA can't go after you and say like, oh, you're running a sanctioned match. I mean, it is very clearly said, hey, this is an orientation class, and you will see just about everything. I mean, I had a guy, he was confused about the decocker on his Beretta, so.
We all are.
I know. Well, he forgets to drop his mag, and he's and he's about ready to unload show clear, and I'm like, he is going to pull the bang.
Mm-hmm.
But it was pointed down range, and you stop the class, you say, hey, what just happened? He fired around on unload show clear. Yes, but he's not DQ'd, and to be fair, it was safe. And once it happens, the guy's like, I'm never doing this game. Like, I'm always going to remove my mag. I'm, going to rack it. It was done in a safe manner, right? I mean, I had one dude show up with a Beretta in a small of the back holster, a straight up small of the back holster.
I like this.
I've actually had that happen before.
He had duct tape that he put on his back.
No, it was but
it's worked in the movie.
He was like, I want to be able to shoot at practice with this holster. And I'm like, that's never going to happen. You're never going to find a rank anywhere. Like, just drawing the gun, you're basically pointing it all down the line. I'm
Well,
like,
it's like that's what I call 2005 YouTube carry. It's like, how do you carry? It's like it's 2005. I was like, I carry in a Blackhawk small to back holster with my M9. This is like
Shut up! You're like bringing back really bad memories that of things
oh,
I've done.
these were the good old days. These are the
Chris
good old
Costa.
oh my gosh.
No, but I mean, you're right though. It's hard because you're always wanting to. You'll have people show up with what they think works, and you have to educate them and just teach them. And gosh, if we had that, it's so funny because I ask people like how they find out about the match, and it's always like usually through word of mouth. Occasionally it'll be people who go to the website, but there's information on the cover of the splash page of USPSA.com. Nobody looks at it. And it's the weirdest thing.
Yep.
I mean, again, the bar is not that high, right?
No.
I mean, look, do I care if you show up on Uncle Mike's holster? I might watch you a little bit more, but I'm just happy you came out. I mean, my first match, I was from the tactical defensive community, so I was like, well, I've got a Glock 19 and a Raven concealment holster and some pouches. I guess I'm going to shoot limited.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And literally, it shouldn't change. Now you can shoot IDPA and be perfectly fine on that. What was I gonna say? So the kind of funny thing is like when you deal a lot with new shooters, it's like the really scary part is like loading the gun, holstering, taking the gun out of the holster, unloading the gun, putting it back, and then like movement somewhere after that, right? So it's just like,
dude, you have no idea.
Oh well, police trainer Jared.
I would really like to see. I'd like to see USPSA get rid of the tie down strap rule for like holsters. We have to deal with that all the time.
Yeah, I'm not entirely. Well, again, you and I haven't been in the sport that long, but it is kind of a question of, well, why did you not allow those?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. It's not like honestly, it doesn't really help them. It's not really giving them a competitive advantage, except they think Lucas Botkin does it, so it's cool. And I mean, that's
most of the time you're watching somebody run like some old drop offset leg holster that we had, in the military, where you're like, you need that tie holster, otherwise that thing is just flopping all over the place.
Right. So it's not like it's gonna make them better. And so it's just funny. We run into that.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is in some of those things they're actually needed, because if you are a police officer and you're running it, some of those drop attachments, they actually tend to bow out, which is even worse on a draw that we have the gun starting to flex out away from the hip as the guy's trying to draw the damn holster, the gun out. And then it's like, if the gun comes out like this, which one's more safe, this way or like vertical? And so it would be clearly like that. And if someone wants to show up with a freaking super drop low leg holster, as long as it stays in position, doesn't fly off, and it's secures the weapon.
I know how I do it in new shooter matches and on all my level ones. If they show up and they have a drop, I mention it to them. Hey, this is the rule book, and then I tell them the same thing every single time. Don't change anything, because you know how to draw safely with that strap involved, and if you pull it off now, the odds of you, because a lot of them have cops all the time. They have the thumb brakes or whatever to release it. They'll end up like just flexing that holster all the way out, and it's like, that is clearly not safe. Here's the rules. Here's why it is, and then fix it if you want. If you ever go to a level 2, you're naturally going to fix your gear. But other than that, let's just keep you safe.
They'll never go to a level 2, so it's fine.
Yeah,
it's fine.
Let them have a fun time.
Yeah. All right, next question, Robert.
Let's see. Next question. If you had to accept one of the changes to the rules, divisions, etc., that have been blowing up on FaceSpace lately, what would it be?
Geez, what are we talking about? We're talking about, let's see,
what day
the last
is it?
podcast. Yeah, no, right. You had the podcast talking about major power factor being lowered, right? That was something that was being discussed. It was in the rules committee addendum to the minutes, and then there was the whole Carry Optics 2011 thing.
Yeah.
Are those the two that are salient? Those are the two that are salient right now, right?
Those are probably the two biggest ones that have people kind of talking about. I mean, that I can think of. I can't really think of anything else. The major minor, and then the slide ride carry optics. I think those are.
Well, I'd say also the old ones that have already been implemented. Whether you're allowing the tactical lights or the 64 ounces. I mean, honestly, which one's gonna hurt the sport more? Tactical lights or 2011s and carry optics? I don't know.
I mean, that's like asking how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, right? I mean, you know, I think the end of the day is, you know, you sort of recognize, are these really significant changes? You know, if you shoot long enough, you realize it doesn't matter, right? I mean, I can shoot my M&P Gen 1 carry optics gun, and I shoot it about as well as my Tanfo. That's a good pound and a half heavier. So It really doesn't matter. But there's always the question of, you know,
perception.
How it's really kind of what you mentioned, Robert. It's not so much the substance of the change that is the question. It's the manner in which the change is implemented, right? I mean, at least there's some discussion about carry optics 2011s and major power factor, and that's out in the open. So at least there's a discussion that's going on, and, you know, members that are sufficiently motivated, you know, can contact their area directors or their representatives and say, hey, this is how I feel about it. And so there's at least a discussion. I mean, is it really a guided discussion? It's kind of a free-flowing discussion at this point, which is certainly better than, you know, what we saw. I mean, you and I, Robert, I mean, we're production lifers. And so, you know, I didn't hear any inkling of this. Hey, let's make it, you know, 59 ounces. Let's add flashlights. Let's allow appendix carry. And so, you know, that was a surprise. I mean, I think I heard about it at the Florida Open right before the annual board meeting, where they said, "Oh yeah, this is actually going to be a thing." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?"
Right.
But pragmatically, okay, does it really matter whether you run a flashlight or not? No, not really. I mean, does it really matter whether you can appendix carry? I mean, I've shot my gun appendix carry at a USPSA match before. It's a fun challenge, you know, to experience every once in a while and go, okay, I can actually do this.
You've also shot in armor.
Allegedly, twice.
Well, that's so the kind of funny thing is, so like the carry optics thing is one thing. I think, like, besides the wear and tear on the firearms, the 165 power factor, which I think is fun, is I think a lot of the discussion around that is literally about trying to fix the divisions through another way. So like trying to make minor guns more competitive and limited, trying to beef up the minor power factor to something a little bit more robust, to kind of like meet in the middle somewhere, but basically trying to, it's almost like we're trying to wean ourselves off 40 caliber and 38 super comp, and then trying to make the divisions more competitive.
But that's the funny thing. I mean, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry. I mean, the interesting thing about it is, I mean, if you were shooting open guns back in the day when it was, you know, 357 and 38 super and 38 super comp, you know, again, I'm sure someone will jump in here at some point and educate us and say that they had the same amount of, you know, breakage in firearms, but, you know, those cases had more volume. You know, it was generally lower case pressure. So doing 165 out of a case that has a reasonable amount of volume to it that could handle that was not, you know, necessarily a big deal. I mean, you have 38 super 1911s that are definitely higher than major power factor, but then things change where you're like, oh, now I can actually do it with a 9mm case, and you're clearly pushing the boundaries. So is this one of those things?
I think you've gone over the boundaries at that point.
Oh no, yeah, way over the boundaries. So then the question is okay, are we going to adjust the rules because, you know, people still want to be able to shoot open, but not necessarily, you know, spend the perceived cost on 38 super comp? I mean, at the end of the day, open is basically like the F1 equivalent, right? I mean, you're basically getting a gun that you're essentially replacing all the parts, you know, every 2,000 to 3,000 rounds, and you're, you know, an open gun is inherently probably the most expensive gun out there. So it's sort of, you know, it does sort of raise the question of, are you trying to, you know, you're already spending, you know, $5,000 to $7,000 for an open gun, but you don't want to spend, you know, the money for 38 super comp. So you're going to go with 9, but 9 creates issues. So, hey, can you please change the sport so I can shoot this round in a way that it was never really intended to be.
Well,
So
the one thing is,
essentially, it sounds like what happened is they created a problem, and now they want the sport changed to solve their problem instead of, I don't know. I mean, that's it seems like that, right? Because
well,
like,
that's
hey, the 9mm major, we can shove all the powder into this 9mm, even though it cannot handle it, and it's way above any book spec. But now we don't like that, and we're not going to go and use 38 Super, and so we want you to change the sport for us, not because of any other reason.
well,
That seems a little weird.
well, it's kind of funny because if the answer is about pressures, there are other calibers you could shoot in open that would reach major power factor, but the problem is then because it becomes a capacity issue. So the answer is that really not about pressure; it's about capacity. Because we do have the ammunition out there to literally shoot, so it literally becomes, well, why do we want to shoot that? Because we want the 2 extra rounds. And so, like, if you literally, like, this is where, like, here's like, it's a 26 round magazine limit of whatever ammo you want. Have fun. And then what would happen? You would see 40 caliber, and you'd see 10mm, and you'd see a bunch of other calibers that were literally built to handle those kind of pressures, and you would see those going in there. But because we could literally just say how many, and we don't want to count rounds because that's a pain in the ass. But it's another roundabout way of trying to solve a capacity issue, and the people's resistance to actually changing, trying to change something else when really the issue is capacity. So
yeah, it is to a certain extent. I mean, but then there's also something you said about being able to read your audience and read the direction that the market is going.
Yep.
So if the tendency is to go to 9 major and you still want people to be able to shoot that,
sure as hell not going to 40. That's for damn sure.
No, I mean, you could always do what Johnny Lim does. So Johnny Lim, when he comes and shoots our match, he actually shoots a Wildcat 40 round. So he actually takes 40 brass and resizes it to something that looks like 357, but it's not really 357. It's hilarious because you'll be sorting the brass. You're like, oh, 40. Wait, this, and then you hold it next to the 357 case. So the neck is it's still a bottleneck round, but the neck is shorter than a 357, and it's always great. I'm like, oh, well, thanks, Johnny.
This will go into the special file.
What?
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, like, that's hard. Like, if you had to accept one of the two, it's tough. It's a no-win situation. You're going to anger people either way you look at it. So you're almost playing the game of trying to mitigate who's going to be the maddest. I mean, do you destroy essentially limited major and open major, which are two very well established divisions? Because if you go up against that, then you essentially are turning it into irons and carry optics. And that's what USPSA turns into.
I mean, the question though is that really kind of what the trend is? I mean, essentially optics and irons. I mean, I think there's still obviously a place for irons. That's going to go on for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at carry optics, I mean, carry optics is pretty much turning into production when it was first brought in. You can go to the store, buy a Glock 34 MOS, or you can buy a Canik, or you can buy any off-the-shelf, handgun that is already set up for optics.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So next question: what are your thoughts about shooters relaying the scores to the RO instead of the RO checking the hits?
What, like the competitors scoring themselves?
It would sound like that, yeah. Maybe not the shooter themselves.
Well, if we're talking about like
directly, go ahead.
For everybody else here, so like obviously this is not happening. This is not a rule book thing. So like, what's our opinion on it at like local matches and other matches where people are calling off the hits? It's like, I don't have a problem if I'm sitting there and I shot and Jared's not shooting. And Robert's keeping score, and Jared's like, hey, taping this target way down here. And when he's walking back, he's like, Alpha Charlie, right? Because I know that a lot of people will literally be like, he's got a mic, let Tom see it. and then I will walk up there and then go like, okay, I shot a mic. So like that doesn't happen. I think what happens is like anything, it's like build any community or have any society with immoral people. Nothing ever works. That's right. So it's like if you have people who cheat while doing that, that's a bad idea. And it's like same with like when you have ROs or SOs that will edit their own scores or mess with the score pads. That's a bad idea also.
Tony Cotton.
There's some
Tony.
Well, no, Tony. I am offended. I am offended you would say that about Tony. He is running for Congress, sir.
What did I say?
Tony,
I was just,
Tony
I have
Cowden
COVID.
is a
I coughed.
fine. He's a fine, upstanding man, and he is running for one of the most hallowed positions that our country could ever have. He is going to be a congressman, sir, and that means that he is honest and impeccable.
And he won't lead the insider trading list like Dan Crenshaw. Believe me, he won't do it. Okay?
Yeah.
Anyways.
That's
Nobody talks about the pirate seal.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's impressive to be just outbeating professional traders.
What do you
Anyways,
think,
competitors scoring each other or calling out scores.
I mean, do we effectively do that at club matches? Yeah,
Sure.
we kind of do. I mean, you're trying to push things through, in a very timely manner, and there's a certain amount of trust that's involved with that. Where if there's any questions, whoever the actual RO or AR is, we'll call them over. I don't know. That's kind of one of those questions where you say, okay, can you actually officially say that in the rules? Probably not. In practice, is that pretty much what we see? Probably. I don't see how that would really work in a major match, though. I mean, in a major match with dedicated ROs, certainly that's, you have to have the designated, person actually do the scores to ensure some level of, fairness and equal treatment.
Well,
Absolutely.
well, it's not like you don't have any recourse now. So if like there's a target that was taped and the guy's coming back and you're like, I thought I shot something else, and then you talk to the RO and the RO doesn't score it, the RO's put in a pickle where basically he can't determine the score and can't trust the competitor that sat there and told him. So you basically can work your way into a reshoot if you want to have something like that. So there is ways around it now, but honestly, if you have a problem with it, I would. We're not talking about level 2s, but if you have a problem with your local club, that is probably not the problem you're actually seeking to resolve.
I'd say, YeeMin, I mean, you've worked more major matches than just about anybody. Well, certainly more than any of the current USPSA candidates for president have combined. I mean, but when you run all of those, I mean, you have your offside RO. They're calling out the scoring hits. Sometimes you've got the guy in the back who is your third guy, and he makes the copies. But has that ever? I mean, that's a known system, and the system works exceptionally well. I mean, is there any reason that you can see from a level 2 and above standpoint to make any changes to that?
I mean, that it's, at that point you're really sort of talking about it from a training issue and coordinating with the range master, right? I mean, so can you do split scoring, right? So let's say you and I are working a stage, that's something you can talk with the RM about, where we're both watching the competitor, but when we're done, Robert, takes the back targets, because the rule basically says it just has to be an RO that scores. It doesn't. Yeah. We traditionally have the timer RO look at it for consistency purposes, but that's to a certain extent we are kind of counting for lowest common denominator, right?
Right.
You and I working a stage, or me and Tom working a stage, we're probably we have the trust and competency to be able to do that. If you have sort of a mixed bag, you're trying to account for that variance as much as possible. So I mean, I don't necessarily see that it's something that at a level 2 and above match that we really need to change that.
Yeah.
It's really just the training and mentoring and making sure that a process is followed. I mean, you could have some really weird way of scoring a stage, but if it works and it's efficient and you get the end result, then okay, it works.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I suppose, you go through, you score the targets, and it's like, when I did nationals 2 years ago, where we always told them during the stage brief, if we're going to do split scoring, if there's anything weird about the target, we're going to hang on to it and call you back and let you look at it before we tape it.
Yep.
and nobody seemed to have a problem with that.
All right, let's do a couple more, and then we'll head on out.
All right. Where does the range officer? Where do you see the range officer training going? Is it all going to be online?
Does it make sense to have some aspects of the training online? I mean, we've certainly had that discussion before, where if you look at the RO certification process as your initial exposure, and not really. I mean, we all know that there's people that are RO certified out there that don't necessarily practice. It's a nice thing to have and say, hey, I'm RO certified. But then most of what we actually learn and experience is through repeated ROing. At a club match. Oh, I've never seen this before. Oh, I've never seen this before. You sort of add that. It's an experiential process. I mean, it's certainly something that's worth discussing. Certainly if we have this concern that, we don't have enough people ROing, but then, in order to be an RO, you have to attend a class. I mean, here, obviously at Richmond, we're very spoiled. I mean, we have so many competitors here. If we have an RO class, we'll get 20 people at a wait list.
Wow.
Yeah, we will get 20 people on a wait list.
We're begging for 20 people here.
Yeah.
Right.
No, like if we wanted to do a Sierra class, we would have 20. We would have 30 people. Like not even without even trying, because there's just that much of a critical class. But then you look at where you're at, and you guys have a fairly sizable section, and you're struggling. What if you're a club in the middle of Wyoming? To say, okay, we want you to drive however far it is to go take a class. That does create. You could argue that creates a barrier to entry, and then you go, well, why don't we have enough ROs? Okay, well, not everybody lives in an urban area where you can literally just snap your fingers and people, come out of the woodwork.
I just kind of find it pretty interesting as far as like certification and test goes. Like, so you get your Class A license to drive the big rigs around, right? And so you have this manual, and then it's like it has little sections for what you're applying for, and then you do all that. Then you go to the DMV and you take like the written test, and then you get a little thing that says like, I'm certified to have someone sit next to me while I learn how to do this. Right? And so it's like it can be very obvious for USPSA to come up with a system that has a learner's permit for ROs, so that they can be paired with an RO and then or an instructor for matches or whatever, and go through and then have practical applications of doing this. And then it's like, okay, you've been an RO for 6 months. Here's your final written test. We don't have any complaints about you. You're certified. And so like having everything in one, because like having all the information dumped on you in one day's class doesn't give you as much experience, but it does let you know that there was a consistency in instruction from the instructor. But if you have the consistency online, and then you go out there and you have like, maybe our problem is we need people to be certified to watch other ROs until we certify those ROs. So maybe the structure in fact needs to be just changed a little bit. Because if like Robert was walking me around and being like, make the calls. Okay. One, do this, do this, do this, do this. Right. 6 stages. He's like, and hey, you've sat there and you've RO'd 50 stages. You've hit your 50-stage RO quota. Here's your ticket, champ. You're out of here. Thanks for playing. You're a certified RO.
Nice coming from someone who's not an RO. I'm not an official RO, but obviously I've done quite a bit of stuff where I've run matches. I've been a match director for all sorts of stuff. But from my perspective, like Dave was talking about it the other day, like, hey, who wants to go to the RO class? It's the X amount of hours. It's this time. And I'm like, I have no desire. I have zero desire to do that, because why would I? But if it was an online format, I feel like I would be much more inclined to watch an hour or 2-hour video and then just go to matches and RO like I normally do, because I run most of the squads I'm on. I help out quite a bit.
Right.
But that would get it all done while I'm already doing it, which I feel like I would be more inclined to do that than going to an actual class.
Well, I just feel like we're also bottlenecked behind instructors, right? So range officer instructors. So we're kind of bottlenecked in that regard, because we have to have them come around, and then we have to schedule, and then it's like, can you get these people there at that time? And do you want to go there? So
I think one of the biggest challenges that you're going to have to deal with in the presidential position is it's one of the things we deal with in architecture all the time. You have people who have developed an ideology that works. Construction is conservative by its nature, and we do what works. But you have new technology that comes along, and that technology offers you ways to do that job easier, more efficiently, with less errors. But the people who are in charge at the time, they are so comfortable with the way things work that they're like, no, we're not going to explore that at all. And we don't want to explore it because we're going to lose the power and control that we have over making this thing correct. And they're not necessarily wrong. The challenge, though, is that they then avoid ever putting themselves in a position to see how much the technology can actually benefit them. And I think it's hard. And I would say if you become president, that's something you probably want to look at, is like trying to help bridge the gap between what ultimately is old hats and the potential for new technology, because there certainly is a value in giving somebody an online format and then potentially taking that same format and say, okay, we've given you this. Now we're going to have a mentorship program, or we're actually going to then have the range officer instructors come out, or RMIs come out, and actually teach these programs. It gives people more opportunities. My mentality is kind of an all of the above approach. Let's do anything we can to get more range officers.
Well, the one thing too, it's not like the old program does not produce great range officers. That it's not broken in the sense that it does not give us quality officials. It's just that it has a problem with getting people to go into it, and so I don't think it's either. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Like you could have the old program continue and have a new program continue as well.
All right, here we'll ask a few more just let YeeMin answer them. Let's see, from Sebastian Munoz, how are you going to fix the broken classification system?
Yeah, I saw that question. I mean, that's honestly, that's kind of a complicated answer, right? I mean, so we do understand that there is some issue with classifications as exists, but then there's also the challenge that we acknowledge, actual match performance versus your classification. There's certainly something. It's some discussions that I've had where, if you look at any other sport, we're the only sport that has a classification system. Does it make sense to have a classification system?
Well, well, when we go to a match, YeeMin, what they do is they ask us what classification we are, and then they separate us by that classification into squads. And then we solely compete against each other in the same classification. That's what we do at USPSA.
Yeah.
Allegedly. I mean, the question would really, I guess I would put the question back on Sebastian, where, it's in what way do you deem that the classification system is broken?
Do you think there's any merit to the idea of putting a sunset period on classifications or classifiers, so that after a certain period of time we slowly phase out classifiers that, as everybody likes to say, have been shot out? And because some of these classifiers, these stand and blasts, it's easy. It's not necessarily easy, but it happens where somebody can hook up and they're like, yep, send it. That's what we're going to do. And so the classification is unnaturally high. And so if we had a way, just say after 10 or 15 years, the classification system, this classifier specifically, can no longer be shot for score. Is there value in that, or is that something that you kind of just want to look at, or is it worth looking at?
I think there would be some validity in that. I mean, you and I were both in the RM program, and I think one of the issues with replacing classifiers is that the amount of dimensional data that you need, while also accounting for, okay, it's something that could be shot across a wide variety of ranges. So you run your indoor match. There's things that you are limited to, where everything has to be downrange. To a certain point, you kind of start running out of ideas for, okay, well, how do I test this skill? How do I test this, gun handling ability with, 8 to 12, maybe 20 rounds, and have it designed in such a way that it is repeatable regardless of where you build it.
Yeah.
No, and honestly, well, you think about the classification system. When it's at the top end, it doesn't matter a lot, but when you're at the bottom end, it sure does matter a whole bunch. Especially when it comes to awarding prizes and stuff like that and trophies. It's like when you're like the top C class in carry optics at a state match, it's like, get the kids ready, babe. We're going out to dinner and we're buying those Disneyland tickets because you're married to this guy, so be happy
I am
about
a national champion.
and so like it means a lot to those, and so like it kind of but after that, like after you've been at a while, like it kind of doesn't matter like where you place in the overall in the division, where you place in the division kind of seems to be a whole lot more. And so it's like where it's kind of like all the other things is like, is there another approach to having it where we could have standard type stages, which could test stand and shoot abilities and could be repeatable and universal, but then could we also have another way that we could actually incentivize middle to lower class shooters and give them something to work towards?
Well, I mean, if you look at if you were to use the classification system, and the analogy is like a martial arts belt system, right? I mean, it's roughly similar to that. You know, based on your progression and your skills and your ability, you know, you go from yellow to white to yellow to green or whatever. I mean, I think the classification system does make sense for that, from that particular purpose of, you know, hey, I'm making some sort of progress and achievement in my shooting goals. Can that coexist with, let's say, you know, some kind of a ranking system where you see how you perform against the best at major matches? I mean, that could be a possibility right there. So you're not just outright killing the classification system. You have two systems where, hey, I am achieving a certain set of goals. That's classification, and then there's the comparison to everybody else.
Right.
And that might incentivize, you know, actually going to major matches. So if I do well at major matches and I'm, you know, ranked 1 or 2 in my division, then you know, like, hey, I've actually achieved this in comparison with my peers.
That is one thing, the only thing that I will say that I like what UML has done with their classification system is that it's 100% based on match performance and 100% based on if you've been to a national level or an area level or a state level, so you can get classified at different things. So you could be a pro at state, but on a national level, you could be, you know, a semi or a whatever. And that's one thing, though, that I do think UML did well, but that's neither here nor there.
It's almost like we could only have the classification system in a level 2 and up thing based on your other prior state match experience.
Okay. So, last 2 questions, really quick. What are your plans for multi-gun and 2-gun?
That's a tough question. I mean, I think there still is a place for multi-gun. Certainly, we have a fairly decent multi-gun community here, but they primarily shoot UML. I mean, I think that's one of the things that Pete Rensing, you know, did a very good job at in terms of how he implemented that. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it kind of comes down to, you know, what makes you competitive in 3-gun. So, I mean, I think, Jared, you probably shot a little bit more of that. I mean, how often does a 3-gun match basically devolve into how well can I quad load a shotgun?
Right. That's all of the 3-gun. Well, the 3-gun matches used to be, it was who didn't have a malfunction with their shotgun.
Whose shotgun actually completed the match.
Right.
That was literally what it used to be.
The Mossberg told me this. Jerry Mitchell told me this shotgun was gonna work.
But and that's the thing. And now it's. I think there's an awkward situation right now in the 3-gun world where UML is trying its damnedest, but for whatever reason, I don't know why. I don't have an answer. But UML. I mean, 3-gun seems to be dying, except for all of the old school matches like Superstition, a handful of the other big established matches. Those sell out, and you know, you 200 to 300 competitors. But you look at the big national matches for a lot of these UML matches, they have 50 to 60 competitors, sometimes less.
I mean, I think the Wyoming Governor's Cup was, I mean, it was pretty bare last year from what I remember looking at.
Well, and that's the one thing though that I really like about USPSA is they have that infrastructure in place. They have the rule set in place. There's no questions. There's no like, is this gun worth $1,000 or $1,200? Get out. There's not. You don't have that issue.
I may have some experience with that.
Yeah, Robert. But I really like that USPSA has that. Not necessarily infrastructure, but also the clout, the actual renown, where if you're going to a USPSA area match, you have 300, 400, 500 competitors. You got a lot of guys at USPSA nationals, the same thing. And I think that also carries over to USPSA multi-gun matches where there's a little bit of clout there. There's a little bit of everybody knows that the USPSA guys are rule Nazis. They know that they're serious about their shit. They know that they're actually very, very it's going to be a fair match versus sometimes at these 3-gun matches, everybody's like, it's fine, chamber flag. It's just point it up.
Well, I know how you win all those guys over. You just 2 words: stage DQs. That's it.
Yeah.
It's just a stage DQ, baby. We'll see you on the next one.
Man.
God bless.
I mean, so with 3-gun, I mean, if you look at 2-gun, I mean, certainly like that's kind of where I started in the tactical community where, everybody generally carries a rifle and pistol.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's always the question of, okay, how do you make it so that it provides you some kind of shooting challenge, but it's not necessarily something where we're going to be waiting around, a minute and a minute and a half for somebody to finish a stage.
Right.
And so there's always challenges with that too. I mean, I thought it was really good when USPSA first came out with the 2-gun nationals idea. But you have your challenges. You have it with PCC and pistol. Okay, well, you're both shooting 9, even if you use different targets. How do you really tell if somebody shot the right target with the right platform?
Mm-hmm.
So, but again, at the end of the day, I think they have a place. There's very, unique logistical challenges to both. And considering, that we're mostly part-time people trying to figure this out, I mean, I think we're doing the best that we can to try to find different ways to get people engaged in shooting sports with not just, pistol.
Are there USPSA state or regional matches for 2-gun or 3-gun? Because I've only seen USPSA 2-gun or 3-gun multi-gun nationals. I've never seen a USPSA 3-gun like local. Is that a thing?
No, as far as I know, it's nationals. I've never seen it at an area or a state. Heck, I mean, out here on the West Coast, we're mostly familiar with the same matches you went to. Superstition, Mystery Mountain,
right,
up in the Northwest multi-gun match. Those were kind of the big matches that everybody would go to, or the Iron Man match. As far as USPSA running it under that auspices, that's certainly something that I can't say I've seen.
All right, from Ruben Garcia. That's kind of a multi-part question. What is the future of USPSA? Is it cutting-edge equipment development? Is it an activity where boys hang out on the weekends? Is it a place for Timmies, competitors, professionals, and amateurs? How do you unify and coalesce all of these subsects of the sport?
I think the reality right now is it's really all of the above, right? So there are certainly those of us that are, serious competitors, and we try to take every match, as seriously possible. We're willing to spend the time and effort to go to major matches and so on and so forth. But then there's also the club matches where Tom goes, "I'm lonely. Please come join me, Robert."
Never said that. Never happened.
He definitely did.
Hang on, I'll post video.
You stole Robert from me, you monster.
Oh. Well, I mean, if you were to have a shoot off to determine who gets Tom, who would win?
Do we have to move?
Stationary.
It's probably 6 is stationary.
But I mean, there's
I don't know. We had that classifier. If Tom make sure to insert the magazine. Then
I didn't rack around into the chamber. That's how great my Saturday went on a classifier. He's like,
First
loaded.
Wow.
I
Wow.
didn't put a round in.
I mean, I guess, my back is killing me right now, so I'm sure it must have been pretty bad if you forgot the press check.
No, I actually felt pretty good at that point. So
Yeah, you
It's a
you could-
Beretta. They're hard.
You could say it's conspiracy theory, but I mean, after the first stage, he looked at the hip factors, and then the second stage, he looked at the hip factors, and the third stage, well, man, that back's really starting to hurt there, boys.
But I mean, there is certainly a social aspect to it, right? I mean, we all enjoy hanging out with like-minded individuals. It's that thing you do once a month or once every so often, and you see people that you don't normally get to hang out with. I mean, you create a lot of really great social relationships. I mean, I've met tons of great people. So I think right now it's trying to find a balance between all of that, right? You want to have the space for the people that are serious enough to be competitors, that are trying to make a real go of things, but also acknowledge that for the vast majority of us, we show up, we hang out, we make fun of each other, we laugh and cry about how well we perform in a match, and then Robert and I get hazed by John Batista for 3 hours telling us how much we suck.
Mm-hmm. This is a fact.
So I mean, it's really all of the above. I think you absolutely can do that. So that's what your nationals area and level 2 matches are for, to a certain extent, is to create that true competitive environment. But then the club matches, where most of us generally will hang out at, that's where you go and try to get better at shooting and have a good time and enjoy it.
Okay, I have one last question, but it's from me. What's USPSA doing right?
So I think they're definitely doing a good thing in terms of trying to maintain a rule set that is fair, that's relatively easy for everybody to understand and enforce. I think they're doing a really good job at essentially holding a lot of nationals every year. If you think about an organization that doesn't necessarily have a huge cash flow, being able to hold 6 national events a year, through quite a bit of volunteer work, that's actually really impressive. It's generally doing a really good job of actually trying to be mindful of what the members' input is, while also trying to keep an eye on what the future of the sport holds. So it's a very delicate balance, especially with not a whole lot of paid staff. I mean, we're all basically trying to do the best we can with the limited time and resources we have in place.
Okay, so why do you want to be USPSA president?
Because I love you, Robert.
That is the answer.
So why should we vote for YeeMin?
Because I've been involved in the sport, from every level, as as what we call a dirty competitor to, chief range officer at nationals, armed for level 2s. I have, I've been there to experience all the things that a competitor has, as well as all the things that are required to actually make the sport run. I got my RL certification a year in, and I wanted to learn and enjoy the sport. I've met a lot of great people, and there's a lot of great people and great ideas out there that I would like to be able to, bring into play. So to keep, at the end of the day, keep the sport fun for everybody, but also see what we can do to, make it more of a competitive sport.
No, the real answer would have been because we'll give you walkthrough music.
That might be a possibility as well.
Everybody needs walk-up music.
I thought the answer basically boiled down to I ain't no bitch.
Well, I mean, if I get elected USPSA president, I think we're pretty much playing Tom's song for every walk.
What J-Boy Y Phoenix?
You know what? It is quite a catchy song.
It is the intro. You can't beat the intro. That's why we play it on this show. So the one thing I would say is you have a vast experience with USPSA, and not like USPSA on all levels. Like I used to joke around that you had your tongue on the pulse of USPSA, and so like
and it's quite salty.
and so it's like there's not an aspect of USPSA that you don't really have a good idea about what's happening and the ideas around it. So I'm voting for you. You've been a class
And
act
you have
ever
a
since I know you.
nice button-up shirt.
You do.
With my girlfriend's face on it.
Jody.
So, anyways, thanks for coming on, YeeMin. We always appreciate it. Thanks for everyone for asking questions. That was a very full comment section. We appreciate that. Thanks for Jared for filling in. Robert, as always, for being on the show. So for Robert, Wyatt, Jared, Stepp, and YeeMin Lin, I'm Tom Nelson. Bidding you peace, love, and soul as we depart into the open waters of the Sea of Life on a little podcast we like to call the PARAcast.
Good night, everybody.
Doot.